Dying Light 2 Stay Human is the second iteration in the Dying Light franchise, developed by Techlands, the guys who made Call of Juarez and Dead Island games. And it's a parkour-inspired FPS RPG zombie survival game, and to Techland's credit, they nailed the blend of all of these different genres. It most certainly is an interesting combination, but it's done really well and makes some sort of sense. Sure, it's not realistic, but you're playing a zombie game. Realism can't be expected for everything. If you're a fan of the original Dying Light games, then you'll most certainly be a fan of this one. It's more of the same except with new locations, new abilities, new traversal techniques, and a brand new story. To me, it feels exactly like Dying Light 1, which is a great thing for a sequel. Dying Light 2 is like a Cadbury Favourites chocolate box. For you non-Australians, it's a box full of different types of chocolates, and of course some people have their favourites, and ones they like, and then the ones they hate. Much like Dying Light 2, not everyone is gonna sit and enjoy this game. Some parts you'll love, some parts you'll hate, and other parts might not get a reaction at all. But if it clicks with you, you'll fall in love with this game. I thought I'd start with the visuals. Right from the get-go, this game is drop-dead gorgeous. The levels of detail and care that went into the beautiful environments makes this game truly memorable. Once I had access to the glider, I was just left gobsmacked at just how beautiful this game looks as you're gliding through the city. The excellent visuals, the lighting, it just sells the world's believability. The way that nature's taking back the city for itself, the grass and bushes growing all over, even on the rooftops, which might suspend your disbelief a little bit, but damn does it look cool. The visuals are something that will stick for me for a long time. This game is distinct and gorgeous, and nothing feels out of place. The design of the different factions is distinct from one another. You can tell what settlement you're approaching from afar, what faction certain people belong to. I personally love the PK structure design in the game. The fortified looking buildings and the general aesthetic of the faction is just awesome. Again, these structures and designs are not only believable but also reflect the faction that they belong to. The Peacekeepers or PKs are all about order amongst the apocalypse, so it stands to reason their structures would look heavily fortified against the infected and humans too. I often don't like to mention the performance of games just because it's one of those things that it's really specific to each individual. But what I will say is that running this on a 2080, it struggled at times. I had to spend a little while tweaking my settings to get the game running smoothly at over 60 FPS. Not to mention there are certain points in the game where frame rates dropped dramatically. And no, this isn't a performance issue, this is a bug, or something in the game, because it wasn't just happening to me, but my friends experienced the same thing as well. We even all had it on the exact same cutscene. All of a sudden the frames would just drop to around 20 or even less. If you ask me, this happening maybe once or twice every play session was a bit annoying. This is one of those issues that if it's something that really bugs you, maybe just wait and see if it ever gets ironed out or fixed, and I'm sure it will. But despite Dying Light 2 being a pretty demanding game, it still killed the visual style and absolutely sold the believability of a living world. As for the sound design, I don't think many people can fault just how great this sounds. The environment sounds, the sounds of the infected, the background sounds in general, everything comes together extremely well. The sound alone has often made me scared. I'd be playing the game alone late at night and just hearing the random zombie cries is enough to just spook me just that little bit. The voice acting is done really well. The characters sound believable and sound like they have actual emotions. Like they aren't just reading off some sort of script. But this is where some people have an issue with this game. The lip syncing is horrid. It's like no attempt was made to make any sort of facial expression or movement. It totally kills immersion. The faces just look like robots, which is a shame because of how well everything's voice acted. And a lot of the dialogue is really well done, and it's just let down and ruined by the lack of attention and time given to making NPCs' faces actually feel real and alive with emotion or some sort of expression at the bare minimum. It might be nitpicking, but it's something in that box of chocolates that you might hate or you might just think, whatever, I can look past it, but I think it's worth mentioning. Just FYI, there will be no major spoilers except for what you see on screen. For those who are fans of the original Dying Light game, it's not a continuation of the story from the first one. Not that that would be possible given the ending in the last DLC of Dying Light 1. Anyways, Dying Light 2 takes place 22 years after the events in Haran. The story of Dying Light 2 is of Aiden Caldwell, who's searching for his sister after they got separated when they were just children. As Aiden, you're inclined to help people along the way in hopes they'll help you find your sister, uncover more of your past, and get closer and closer to finding her. Dying Light 2's story is interesting and well constructed. It's got memorable characters, and it gets you to emotionally invest in the characters and the world. Because Dying Light 2 is a game with dialogue options, they impact the way events play out. They may not affect the overall story, but they do affect the ways individuals behave towards you and the way the story ends. None of your decisions dramatically affect the way the story develops, which to some is a shame. But I personally am fine with it since it creates a lot of different outcomes and endings that would just be a nightmare to develop. That being said, there are some dummy dialogue options where you have two choices and no matter what you choose, you still end up at the same point in the conversation, which makes me wonder why bother giving us a choice anyway. It's a fake freedom. All the major decisions that players have are all time mitigated, which is a shame because you know it's an important decision because there's a timer attached. I'd prefer if they had just had a timer to all responses, just because you'd be left guessing of what actions you took that actually create certain results. While it is disappointing that a lot of the dialogue is meaningless, having the choice to affect some events and how the story plays out is always a welcome feature, in my book. Another issue with this game is the questing, in particular the side quests. It's just how copy and paste they all feel. If you came here expecting side quests to be the level they are in the Elder Scrolls games, then you're going to be extremely disappointed. A lot of the side quests are just your typical kill, collect, and deliver quests. Oh, go kill this mutant zombie in this area. Go collect some herbs for a potion. Go deliver this message to my family. You get the idea. But that being said, while most of these are pretty bland quests, there are some quests that are truly interesting and different enough to make them memorable. One quest stuck out with me in particular, and it was learning the history of why the guns were all taken away from the people, which on its own was a pretty dull and boring quest, but it's the fact that later on when I got into another side quest, they tested my knowledge of that event. I realized that these interlinking quests were truly something cool about this game. Again, Dying Light 2 doesn't hold a candle to Skyrim, but it has a few standout quests that it justifies doing some along the way, but definitely not all of them. The combat in Dying Light 2 is, well, the combat in Dying Light 1. For those that don't know, a lot of the game's fights just come from your typical hack and slash melee FPS games, where you have a simple dodge, a block, and an attack. But unlike your typical FPS games, Dying Light mixes the combat up with having more parkour orientated moves added into the mix. Once you've unlocked them, of course, the ability to jump over enemies or use them as springboards to propel you as you drop kick another enemy. There are enough different abilities to play with in the skill tree to ensure that you're always entertained while fighting enemies. That being said, the enemies you face could do with a little more diversity. For the most part, the enemy humans all respond the same, with the exception of the archer and Molotov fire-breathing guy and a large goon, which is just a bigger version of your regular grunt. All of the humans are pretty much approached in the same manner. You don't really have to change how you fight to deal with any of them. Just dodge your attacks or block correctly and it's an easy kill. The zombies also fall into the same hole. They just lack diversity between the mutations, at least in terms of how you approach them. It's still dodge at the correct time, then swing at them until they're dead. Most of the bosses are just the same as normal enemies, except with a larger health bar and maybe one unique attack depending on the boss. Why not have a mutated zombie or a mutated enemy that dies in a certain effect like poison or fire or electricity? Sure, not everyone will have these on them at all times, but again, they don't have to fight every enemy. Diversity is one of those things that lets this game down a lot. But I'd have to say that the combat is saved by the excellent array of abilities, the sound design and effects to make this interesting enough that despite the enemy's lack of diversity, you never really get bored throughout your entire playthrough, and it just keeps you entertained throughout. Parkour is the bread and butter of Dying Light 2. It's fun, satisfying and fluid to move around the world. The large array of abilities and tools you have to get from point A to point B is almost endless. Of course, you have things like sliding, rolling, wall running, wall jumping. The real genius of the parkour in this game is down to the brilliant world design. The way the world is integrated to complement your abilities to get you from location to location is just fantastic. The use of believable objects that would naturally be out in the world is fantastic. It never once felt like an object was solely put there for its ability to help you traverse over the rooftops. Sure, you know it's there in the back of your mind for traversal, but it doesn't break immersion. The fact that there is always a path from point A to point B, which avoids having to touch the ground almost 99% of the time, is just unreal. You always have options on how you want to traverse the world. Based on some of the decisions you have throughout the story and when off doing side content, you get the opportunity to pick factions that control zones. And if you pick the survivors, they offer special bonuses of traversal equipment out in the world, such as zip lines or mini springboards to launch you up higher and further. It's just more gameplay tools for traversing the world, which for me, my favorite was the inclusion of a paraglider, which lets you cruise around the city, take in the sights and stay safe above the dangers of below. It feels really cool to just fly through the gorgeous and beautiful environments. I just can't stress this enough. If you're a fan of Mirror's Edge, the game is probably worth a pickup. Even though its focus isn't entirely on the parkour, it just takes up a large portion of the game, and it's good enough, to me at least, that I was spending time just running around for the sake of running around. Not doing quests, not doing side content, just running around doing parkour. Because this video is way longer than I'd hoped, I'll quickly brush over this one. The multiplayer is pretty seamless. Once you figure out how to actually invite your friends into the lobby, because my god, I don't understand why they don't just have an invite friends button. The game scales the difficulty to the number of players in your party, which is great, except for when you get to the boss fights, because some of them don't seem like they were designed for multiple players, but that's understandable. Nonetheless, loot and progression is client-side, meaning you get to keep the loot and skills that you've unlocked if you're playing on a friend's world. But it also means that once you go back to your own story, you end up being a little overpowered. Of course, you can drop items and gear from friends, as well as vote on certain text dialogues, which the host of course still gets to choose what the dialogue is, but at least they can see what everyone else wants to say. The 4-player co-op is always welcomed, and I think it doesn't do the game any harm at all, and just helps enhance the overall experience when playing the game. Dying Light 2 is a box of mixed chocolates. Everyone's got their issues, their enjoyments, and the things that they're indifferent about when it comes to this game. I for one enjoy the game quite a lot. The visuals are stunning, but come at the cost of needing a pretty decent PC to run it. Not to mention some of the major bugs causing FPS to drop into the 20s, meaning you have to restart the game entirely. On the flip side, you have wonderful sound design and brilliant voice acting, only let down by the robotic-like facial animations and expressions. The story doesn't continue from Dying Light 1, but it, of course, is set in the Dying Light universe, and does a superb job at getting you emotionally invested, while also giving you choices that affect the way events play out throughout the story. The lack of memorable side quests makes it a bit of a hard sell, unless your focus is primarily on the main story. The combat does a decent job to not feel dull and repetitive despite the reusing of enemy types throughout the game. The parkour is really where this game shines through for me. It's just a ball of fun to traverse the beautifully constructed cities with a plethora of traversal tools at my disposal. Overall, Dying Light 2 is a solid title that has its issues, but if you can look past them, you're sure to enjoy this game. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, as well as please let me know your thoughts on the game down in the comments section below.